Do you have a dream that is a small seed of an idea and it's ready to sprout?
Or are you in the workplace weeds and you need to bloom in a new creative way?
Perhaps you're ready to embrace and grow a more vibrant, joyful, and authentic life. If you answered yes to any of these, you are ready to rebloom. Welcome to the podcast where we have enlightening chats with nature lovers, makers, and artisans as they share inspiring stories about pivoting to a heart-centered passion.
Hello, I'm Lori Siebert, and I am very curious to hear from friends and artisans about the creativity that blooms when you follow your heart.
And I'm Jamie Jameson, and I want to dig deep into the why behind each courageous leap of faith and walk through new heart-centered gardens.
Each episode of ReBloom will be an in-depth conversation with guests who, through self-discovery, shifted to share their passions with the world.
Get ready to find your creative joy as we plant the seeds for you to rebloom. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ReBloom. This is kind of a fun one because it's sort of a bloom to rebloom. And I am so excited. I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
And welcome today because we have invited one of our very dear friends, Jessie-Sierra Ross. Oh my gosh. How are you, Jessie?
Hi, Jessie.
Hi. I am doing so well, and I'm so thrilled to be talking to you two, some of my favorite bloomers, I should say.
Bloomers, I know. Well, we should disclose. I know this is such fun. We have all come together through a venture that we have been working on, which is Bloom TV Network, and we were able to meet each other virtually and then in person and form wonderful friendships. And here we are, all three of us together. This is pretty exciting.
Yeah, we held each other's hands through our terrifying first filming adventure. So,
I must say that doing audio is way, way easier.
Yep. Oh, for sure.
Oh, for sure. Well, welcome, Jessie. Jessie-Sierra Ross hails from Massachusetts, and she has danced her way through her career in a variety of wonderful, wonderful experiences. And we are so honored to have you here today, Jessie. So thank you for joining us.
I'm so curious to hear your whole story because, we know you, but we don't really know you. So, now we want to get into the real nitty-gritty details about your journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thanks. Okay, well, let's start with, so Jessie, you started as a professional ballerina. What? Let's start there.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you again for having me on and being able to share my pivot story. I think having a plan B has been my life story. But yes, I started out dancing and I started my lessons at age 5. I was a little shy, socially awkward little girl with big brown eyes and a speech impediment and a stutter. And I didn't know how to communicate easily with the world except through dance and through music. And during that path, I discovered art, I discovered imagination, and people who understood me, whether I could actually verbalize or not, because dance gave me this beautiful, safe space to create and to explore. And I followed my passion. I was sort of tapped very early on that I was going to have a career. And so at age 6 or 7, I think I decided I was going to be a ballerina. And I followed through. I trained at the bar for hours a day, point and modern and Isadora Duncan technique. And by age 14, I had signed my first professional contract with a professional ballet company. And it wasn't unusual to see my biology homework next to my pointe shoes. And I danced with members of American Ballet Theater, New York City Ballet, Paris Opera, was exposed to diverse personalities, diverse artists from all around the world. And it was living and breathing ballet and music and art and culture. And those years were stunning, just stunning to be on stage under the lights and sharing that inner story that I had outward.
Wow.
That's amazing. And how incredible to have your childhood be filled with such beautiful creativity, music and ballet. And that's amazing. And helping you to build your confidence.
Absolutely.
And I can so relate to that, Jessie, because I was an incredibly shy girl, and my outlet was painting and drawing and making. So that creativity, I think it really does feed your soul, and it saves you in a way. I think of it as therapy.
Absolutely. It was that inner life that was so fertile, so blossoming, frankly, that kept me going, especially under the pressures of professional dance, which I eventually peeped out of my shell when I was a teenager and I had a beautiful group of friendships. But, you have to have a very strong inner sense of self and drive to succeed in that career. And it's a very short-lived career. So you have to just go, and that's it. There's, your carrot on the stick is the only thing that you can really see in this world of dance. It's achievement. It's achieving that position in dance companies. And the competition is very fierce. And I learned so much about really not shutting out the world, but maintaining that sense of identity of I have a purpose. What I'm doing is worthwhile. And even though those around me, due to the pressures and competitions of this dance world, they may be trying to shape or tear down or criticize, but in the end, it's you. It's your voice that matters, and your real sort of embracing of that goal as your ideal, as your true sense of self.
Well, and it's believing in yourself, and then that established the foundation and probably gave you the strength for everything else that you've done, because you've built that foundation. I mean, you knew that you knew about you and what you loved, and that's fantastic.
So I'm curious then, you talked about age 14, you signed a contract with a company. So how long after that were you still pursuing that dream, and then what happened next?
It's a really good question. And this would be my first pivot point, my first plan B. So I had joined another professional company at age 18 or 19. And at the insistence of my mother, I had also applied to college, because she was a very wise woman to understand that you can't pin all your hopes and dreams on a ballet career. But I followed through with this larger company, and it was a very intensive phase of my life. It was not altogether mentally healthy. It wasn't an emotionally healthy situation. I had a very complex relationship with the artistic director that I was working under. And although I loved the work, I loved the teachers, I loved the dance, it was very difficult. And by the time I was 21, I started to feel burnt out. I started to feel that the sort of outside influences were taking away from the true passion that I had for dance. And I left at age 21. The spring season ended in June. I went down to Point Park University, one of the universities that I had deferred in. So I went down to view the school in July. I had an offer of a full ride in the conservatory, and I enrolled in classes that September. And I went for a BA in dance with a focus in ballet. And it was a really great experience. It was a nice, I want to say, cushion spot for me to figure out what I was going to do next, because I knew I wanted to still be in dance, but I was very clear that I wasn't going to put up with some of the outside pressures that I had been under at that time. Dance was a very different world at that time. There was it was very different. Think Black Swan.
Okay. And so, this educational pause, I wouldn't ever consider education a pause, but you took a pause from your career at that point because, as you said, as a ballerina, you're very young when you have to pursue this. But what did that educational pause do for you?
It gave me a glimpse to the other side, from the audience side of the stage versus being on stage. I could expand. I could learn about different things. For the first time in my life, I was writing. For the first time in my life, I was able to have the time to delve into topics that I really was passionate about that were outside of dance. But it was a period of time where I had to discover myself as separate from Jessie the ballerina. It was now Jessie the blank. And that's a really scary place to be. It's very unknown. And having decided from such an early age 5, I was Jessie the ballerina, it was both absolutely terrifying and absolutely thrilling. And so that period of time let me explore other facets of my personality as well as my skill sets. I realized that I had other strengths besides moving to music on stage. And that really set the tone for being a lifelong learner for me, and understanding that even though one chapter ends in your life, one that you were completely devoted to, it doesn't mean your life has actually stopped. You have to take that opportunity and embrace that fear to grow and to open yourself to new opportunities and new pathways.
So you were studying dance in college. So you were still in that dance world pretty much. Did you think that you were still going to follow that path?
You know, that's such a good question, because for the first year and a half, I looked at my college education as a pit stop, a place to train, obviously, and to get better in my skill set. But I was still sending out audition tapes and contacting different companies. And I had quite a few bites, but in the end, it didn't resonate with my soul anymore. It didn't align. And as much as I wish it could have, I had almost moved past that point of understanding my own value. And in dance in particular, sometimes it depends on the environment, but we are often treated as juvenile. We are called girls. We're called young ladies. We're very, very much not empowered at that time. Thankfully, it's changed. And I realized that I could not take a step back into that philosophy. I was now a grown woman, and I knew, or was starting to really understand my self-worth. So yes and no. I went on to teaching, and I went in to teaching and coaching and choreography with the intention of not only sharing the skill sets I had gained and the remarkable dance history that I was part of. I was part of a long lineage of amazing teachers, but I wanted to go into it to change the environment. I wanted to empower my young dancers. I wanted to let them know they had a voice in this as much as they had a talent.
So did you have wishes at that point then of starting your own studio?
I did. My intention was, coming out of college, I had a business plan lined up. I had funding, and I was going to open up an arts charter school with a particular focus in dance and theater. And when I returned to Boston after graduating, I started teaching at different studios and making connections and really embracing that life, again, to take control of the narrative and to change the environment. But then I met my husband, my future husband, and we had another pivot point. Pivot
Yep. And you know, that's interesting too, because it's great to have a long-term goal like opening a charter school. That's fantastic. But you still do need to have some of those experiences, like you said, just starting with teaching along the way. But then, of course, life comes at you. And so you pivoted. So then you now danced into marriage and motherhood. Was that your next step?
That was. So I continued dancing part-time in a professional company up until 2016. I married and started my life with my wonderful Canadian husband, who I met in Boston randomly. And, you know, I was still teaching at 6 months pregnant. My little baby who was in my tummy did not like Waltz of the Flowers when I would rehearse. He would walk around in there, let me know. And, you know, after having my first child, you know, another big pivot, I was in a situation where I was suddenly a mother. At that point, I also had some devastating losses. My mother became ill with cancer while I was pregnant with my first son, and I was her primary caregiver until she passed 6 months after I'd given birth. And so
Oh my
suddenly I
gosh.
was both mother to my first child, but I was also mothering my mother and
Your
my
mother.
family, who my mother was the core of our family. And when she was not able to be that core, it kind of the wheel started to fall off. And so my husband and I made a very conscious decision to step in to be the parents. And so I was suddenly parenting my family. And with all those changes after the loss of my mother, there was another shakeup. I left dance because I needed to regroup. I needed to really care for my baby. And I found myself suddenly based out in Western Massachusetts, right on top of it, because my husband had taken a position at a hospital out here. So I was a new mom. I was a new Western Mass resident. And I was a new me because suddenly I didn't have dance at all. So all those anchors I had lifted. And so there was opportunity, but at the same time, again, that terrifying leap off the cliff. And you don't know whether you have your parachute or not, but you hope you do because you have all the stills from those times before.
Wow. I didn't know this part of your story. I'm so, it's so interesting to me to hear all the ways people navigate not only the things internal, but also things that are thrown at them in their lives. And what happens and do you choose to, go into a cocoon and fold, or do you choose to face them and move forward and maybe make changes that might be an even more authentic fit for where you need to be?
I think you find
Absolutely.
your.
And I like how you mentioned authenticity. I had to step into my own light at that point. It's very funny because I think until you lose a parent, you are almost perpetually a child, in a way, even if you're grown. And when you lose that anchor, there's a sense of freedom there, a great, great loss. Don't get me wrong, but it was suddenly a chance to define where I was going, and under my own sort of influences, and being the caregiver definitely was something that shaped how I perceived the world, but it also made me grow. It was almost like a forced sort of sprout, when you force bulbs, and under great stress, under great duress, sometimes something really beautiful happens.
Let's take a quick minute and thank our amazing sponsors. Our podcast is proudly brought to you today by Jet Creative and UrbanStems. Jet Creative is a women-owned marketing firm committed to community and empowerment since 2013. Are you ready to rebloom and build a website or start a podcast? Visit jetcreative.com/podcast to kickstart your journey. They will help you bloom in ways you never imagined. And bonus, our listeners get an exclusive discount when you mention ReBloom. And a huge thanks to UrbanStems, your go-to and our go-to source for fresh, gorgeous bouquets and gifts delivered coast to coast. Use Bloom Big 20 and save 20% on your next order. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at ReBloom Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to you for joining us today.
I was just teaching in Seattle with another artist, and she had lost her husband and had 2 young children. And one of the things she said, which I really like, it just is so inspiring, is she said she didn't want to waste that pain. She wanted to use it to help other people. So she started painting rainbows, and that has like taken on a life of its own. And I know you, Jamie, experiencing loss, you are looking to share hope with others as well.
You're right, Lori. I have experienced loss. Obviously, like you, both actually have lost my mom, and I cared for my mom for about 6 months and recently lost my daughter. And what you find is that, like you said, Jessie, there's a strength inside of you that maybe you didn't even know you had. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of blooms out of nowhere. I mean, I love to use that analogy, but that is what happens. I didn't know that many of the things that have happened to us that I could even move forward. And certainly balancing a brand new baby and losing your mom at the same time, but that beautiful inner strength that your mom gave to you, I think, as a child, between dance and certainly telling you to go to college. Yay, mom. But, I think the gifts of our mother, the gifts of our children, they're with us, and they let us to move forward and let us to accept those new responsibilities as we pivot forward.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. That inner strength that you didn't know you had or needed until that pressure. It's kind of like the pressure to make a diamond. And It's beautiful and it's bittersweet, but it's a process. And we're now in a place, all of us actually, so that when we talk about grief, we're able to relate it and we're able to experience it and let people know there is another side and there is more growth to come.
There is, and grief. We've all experienced grief, and that's certainly the thing that I've learned through all of this. But we've also experienced a wonderful journey. I think each step in life lets us experience new things, as you said, that open the doors to new possibilities. So I was reading in your bio that you're a mom. You've sort of walked away from the dance career, and you are at a Thanksgiving dinner. And it's a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner, and you pivot again. What happened at that? I want to come to your Thanksgiving dinners.
It's always, you know what? It's always open because I always have it on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So friends can come. So both of you have an open invite. But yes, so after settling in Western Massachusetts, and I had this little 18-month-old, then suddenly I had another son. And I had 2 children under 3 years old. So I was going cuckoo banana pants. And it was a wonderful, beautiful, hectic time. But I realized I needed an outlet. I needed a focus. I'm very type A. I've always worked. I've always had a project. And I was going a little bit crazy with all the baby babble. So I decided after a very successful Thanksgiving dinner, where, I had tried out all my recipes and I had friends over. There were 16 people. And instead of emailing my recipes out as most people had requested them, I looked to my husband. I said, I'm going to start a blog. And this is during the time when everybody and their mother was becoming a food blogger. But I didn't care. I didn't care if I was one of 100,000. What I really love is connecting with people, and it taps into that teacher in me too, that instructor. I love telling stories, and cooking obviously is such a passion for me, as well as home entertaining. And that's a facet of my background that I was able to explore once I had left dance, once I had moved out to Western Massachusetts, because suddenly I was in the real birthplace of farm to table living. Up the street, there were farms and dairies and local butchers, and I had access to all these incredible ingredients, and I had time. Suddenly, it was necessity because I had to feed 2 small children and myself occasionally, but also, I had time. And my husband, I mean, he's very happy with sushi takeout, but he is an incredible gourmet. And funnily enough, he used to do all the cooking before we had children because I was never home.
Funny.
So that was another kind of switch. And this blog was born, and I started writing and teaching and creating and trying to come up with a name for it. And we were sitting and discussing with my brother one day, and I said, I need a name. I'm thinking straight to the hips, something like that, because I've always been a bit pear-shaped. Don't tell anyone. And I was like, straight to the hips. And I love that style of cooking with butter, with sugar, real ingredients, not really shying away. This is not everyday food, but this is the food that you serve. This is the food you celebrate with. And I was like, straight to the hips, but it needs something. And my brother chimed in. He's like, how about baby? I'm like, straight to the hips, baby was born.
There you go. Your new baby.
My new baby. And I started blogging as a hobby with my husband taking the photographs, and I did the writing and the styling, and it was marvelous. And it was a great way for us to have a project because his life as a physician is very controlled. So getting in, behind the camera was very creative for him. while my life was very chaotic with 2 small children at home, soon to be 3.
Yeah.
And having the structure of styling and the structure of recipe developing gave me more control. So it was a great kind of yin yang element in our career.
So I have this theory that people often circle back to something that they loved when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
So dance was a primary focus, but did you always have a thing for food and entertaining even when you were younger, or is that something that developed later?
It was a complicated relationship. So I loved cooking. I have very strong memories of cooking with my mother and at being 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I'm one of those late Gen Xers, elder millennials who were, I was cooking dinner by the time I was 9. So I knew how to do it. I loved it. But being in dance created a lot of conflict with food. And it was highly controlled. And I would look at food more as fuel. And I wasn't able to indulge. I wouldn't allow myself to indulge in, these sort of celebration foods because I had to be 120 pounds. I was 5'7". I was all muscle. And and you're taught to an extent, and thank goodness this is not the way it's done anymore. But we were taught, whether implicitly or not, you don't eat. And so my love of cooking was there, but I definitely didn't have the time or sort of the psychology yet to dive into it. But once I had children, once I had time, once I realized that food was a beautiful canvas to play with, and the theatrics, the drama of the stage, which has always been with me. I'm very dramatic, very playful. And I always say to people, I'm like, do you want me to speak or do you want me to tap dance? I'm ready and willing to do anything. But that beauty that I grew up with and really crystallized my point of view, I was able to sort of layer that on top of my food work. And if you look at the photography that we use, it's very light, it's very dreamy. The flowers, they remind me of all the beautiful costuming and tutus and the lighting and the scenery. And setting up tablescapes is a direct correlation to the choreography, where things relate to each other, the distance, the spatial awareness, and the color. And being creative, but also very, I gravitate towards the kinetic, the movement. I was able to use that in something that would normally be very static. And we changed it. We changed the game.
Your table became your stage. And
Correct.
You pulled all of the different elements that make up a beautiful production, whether it be the symphony or the dancers. It's the food, it's the plates, it's the flowers. You pull it all together. And what an incredible pivot, but it's still pulling from your wonderful creative background and bringing all of that together. And so you started with the blog. And obviously, you're making connections. And then where did that take you? Where did that lead you?
So the blog was, a wonderful baby of mine, as you said, that I could really get going and sink my teeth into. And then there came a point after my third baby and the passing of my father, who I was the primary caregiver for. And this is a recurring sort of theme of rebirth after loss. After several years of intense caregiving, I found myself for the first time in my life with older children who were in school full time and this amazing passion for food and home entertaining. And I embarked on the year of why not? I had these words, right after I lost my father in the fall and grieving and coming out and going into the new spring, I decided I was just going to go into life with why not and say yes to opportunities. And suddenly the opportunities found me. So I had done some publishing work, but it was very haphazard. And then suddenly I was introduced to the producer of a morning chat show who said, "Hey, I think you'd be great on TV." And instead of saying, "Oh no, I could never do that. I'm a silent artist. I am not a speaking artist," I said, why not?
Why not? Why not?
Why not? And that really launched me. So I began to do TV food and lifestyle segments all across New England. The pandemic put a little bit of a hiccup in it, but at the same time, it opened up possibilities because suddenly I could Zoom. I could Zoom into kitchens and homes on the West Coast without ever leaving my home. And my knack for step-by-step directions and recipes, but also that performance little beastie in me came out to play. And I found television a natural fit for everything that I had done up to this point. And it was a pivot. It was a pivot in direction, a pivot in media, where I wanted to share my work. And it's been a real foundational drive for me to use television, whether it's streaming or broadcast, to connect with new audiences and to empower the new home cook or home entertainer.
I love when like all of your strengths and learnings, everything that you kind of cultivated throughout your life, all come together. It's like a beautiful circle that I keep getting this visual of you like dancing through one circle after another. And like when you talked about the relationship of food in your past and now, like I just saw this vision of you breaking through all and leaving behind all of those things that you had associated as negative and now twisting it around and magically making it something beautiful and positive.
Beautifully put. Beautifully. I mean, I think all of us as creatives and artists, we do an awful lot of, shadow work, an awful lot of finding out what's holding us back, because in this life, a lot of those barriers, they're artificial. They're the ones we put on ourselves. And they're the ones that are directly related to the psychology of us, our fears, our sensitivities, our anxieties. And through a lot of thinking and realizing, my husband teases me, but it seems like every 10 years I reinvent. I move on to the next phase, but never leaving those skills that I gained from the previous career. This is my third or fourth successful career. And I say successful because I left the previous careers or morphed those previous careers under my own power, under my own choosing. And I think that's been a theme, is taking back that power of creativity and self, because you can drive that engine, you can find your goal, and you can create the platform to get it.
Well, you absolutely can. And you can also, as you've done in each stage, and I love how Lori said that with the circles, you've brought each one of your past careers or past passions with you forward. And they're all part of it. Your family is a huge part. I mean, your family is one of your passions and is a huge part of how you navigate a new change. And it's feeding your family. It's creating meals of celebration. And so I'm curious, I know you like butter. We all love a little butter. But and there are lots of cookbook authors, as you said, there's lots of bloggers. But what types of recipes and things do you look towards that are celebratory, that you bring to your table, that you like to share with your friends and family?
That's a great question. So, food, I grew up with food as love. I'm the daughter of an immigrant. I'm first generation American. And our family events circled around food. It was one of those things that if you celebrated, there was going to be a table absolutely bedecked with everything. So when I think celebration, I think big. And big doesn't necessarily mean fussy. I like to quote that I make food that's, fancy but not fussy. So the flavors that I love are clean, they're bold, they're layered. They are recipes that pack a big punch. They're impressive, but they're not hard to create. So some of the flavors I draw upon are from my Slavic roots. I'm Ukrainian, and with a good dose of Eastern European in there. So, some of my favorite dishes are chicken paprikash, which is normally an all-day braised chicken dish with smoky paprika and vegetables. And, the meat is falling off the bone, and you serve it very saucy over potatoes or egg noodles. And it's comfort, it's love, it's a hug. But knowing me and knowing most of the people around me, we don't have time for an all-day braise. So for me, it was discovering, how do I enrich that dish with all the flavors of home without losing that nuance because of the time? So I started creating recipes that could be done in an hour. And the chicken paprikash is one of my favorites. It's one of the best on the blog. When we were going through pandemic, when sourdough started, it was all the rage. I had a sourdough starter that I grew. His name was Paul Reiser. May he rest in peace. I forgot to feed him for a week or two. But I started creating sourdough recipes. And one of them was an ode to my father, because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. And he had a love of bread that you can't imagine. So I started creating crusty loaves that would crack when you'd open them, and, fluffiness inside. So food was memory. Food was connection. Food was a way that I could bring my mother and my father to my kitchen for my children. I often say that, I used to make challah with my mother, and she would put her hands over my hands to help braid the dough. And I found myself suddenly doing that with my little 5-year-old, and the shades of her hands over ours.
Oh, that's
so
pretty amazing.
It's a way, it's a universal language.
It is.
It's love, and it's food, and it's family. And it's a way to make sure those that have lost, those who are going to come and gather on my table in the future. Can't wait for grandkids, but don't have them too soon, boys.
That would be amazing, Lori, and I love them. Just saying.
Yeah. Like when I get to that stage, I want that there. I want those recipes and those memories and the experiences to be there and ready. And that goes for my family as well as everyone's families out there who enjoy good food.
What a legacy of love that I love how it's just a chain that keeps passing on. So you are actually folding a lot of that into a project.
Yes.
That we'd love to hear about.
Yes.
What a great pivot.
Very nice, Lori.
That was masterful. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I have. This stunning journey has, it's brought me so much joy and let me set tremendous goals. And one of those goals I had since just before I turned 40 was I would like to write a cookbook. And it's been stewing and boiling and simmering in the back. And about a year and a half ago, an opportunity arose with Schiffer Publishing. And they wanted me to write a book. And I said, you want me to write a book? I will write you a book. This is what we're going to write about.
Why not? Because you said, why not?
Right. And I've never written a book before. I had no idea about the world of publishing. I had read up on it. I had, circled around it. But it was one of those situations of right time, right place. Yeah. And so we created a book, a home entertaining and cookbook that focuses on seasons and seasonal cooking and celebration. And the book is called Seasons Around the Table, and it's through Schiffer Publishing, and it's due out October 28th, 2024. And it's in pre-sales right now. But this book, this has been my fourth baby. It is packed with light and bright photographs with lush florals, table stapes, seasonal menus. And the gist of the book is, for each of the 4 seasons, there's 4 holiday menus, and each of those 4 holiday menus are themed. So for spring, let's say, we have an Easter brunch, we have a Mother's Day feast, we have a strawberry soiree, we have all of these things, and each one has at least 4 recipes and a cocktail, because I love cocktails. You give me gin and tonic. Yeah. I mean, one of these days, ladies, we know it. Yeah. And a table scape that goes step by step through the process. Not difficult to follow, and using items that are found around your house, flowers that you can buy at your grocery store, but also modern home entertaining advice that I use in my own kitchen so that I can be with my guests versus slaving away the entire party over a hot stove. And, my parties, these are dinner parties. These are parties for 16 to, 24. We're not talking throwing huge blowouts, but these are the parties where you create original food experiences for your guests that will leave them talking and remembering years later. And that's what I love, is that you've frozen that moment in time. The people around your table are so, again, kinetically connected to the table, to the people around them, to experiencing and exploring the food, the tastes, the table stage, the small little details. And for those 2 to 4 hours, they are there, they're present. And I think in this world where we're constantly being pushed and pulled at technology and current events and family and work, it's a breather. It's a moment of zen where the element of true discussion and enjoyment can be present.
100%. And, you're creating, well, first of all, I love it. You're filling tables with love, not only with food love, but with family and friends. But as I said earlier, it's like you've created a theater, you've created an experience for people, and you're helping people to do that. I grew up, my mother was a gourmet cook. She loved to have people over. It was back in the 60s, 70s, you didn't go out to dinner. You had people over, and you had beautiful, you had dinners, and my mother would spend hours doing that. I remember that growing up as a child. And I remember the people coming. I remember the laughter. I remember the excitement of her preparing it. And those are the memories of my childhood. And you're helping us and others to do that in our own homes. And that's something that I think we've gotten away from. And it's so important. It's so important to gather people in our homes and create those experiences. So yay, I cannot wait for this book.
So I imagine you, Jessie, dancing around the kitchen while you're preparing meals.
On point.
Yeah. And then I wonder, did your family get to the benefits of you writing this book? Did they get to enjoy all the food that you prepared and all the styling? That's another beautiful thing, is that your family is all part of where you're headed and what you're doing. I love that.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a family project. As I mentioned earlier in the talk, my husband is my chief photographer. I would say he's my chief taste tester and my editor, because I like commas too much in my writing. And my children, they love shoot days because they get to taste the end product, but also my elder son would help us. He'd hold the light strims. He'd help with lighting and direction. We also let him take some photographs for himself. My youngest son loves to play with garnishes, and he'll help advise me. He has a keen eye for style, and he's quite a harsh critic, but he's so cute with his dimples. I forgive him. And my little son was someone who liked to act as a sous chef. And he would be in the kitchen asking and questioning. He's very much like I am, always asking questions. And, this book is the end result of those family dinners. It's that feeling of togetherness that I hope that my children will also take forward. But also, as Jamie mentioned too, that gap in knowledge. I think there's been a generational gap because of all of the pulls that society places on us, that oftentimes there's not enough time, or there might not even be enough knowledge out there that's easily accessible. So I think this next generation is turning back and taking the best parts of home entertaining and cooking for others, and leaving behind the unnecessary and focusing in on the beauty and what really resonates with them, whether it's the beauty of a table scape or the full flavors of a home cooked dish, or maybe a wine pairing or original cocktail. It's all about finding what works for you and then streamlining the process so it's not stressful, because if it's stressful, we're not going to do it.
No, we're not. And it's also a beautiful creative outlet, but it's also an amazing opportunity for your family. Yeah. I mean, I took my kids out to dinner a lot, but I also made dinners for them often at home. Think about the experiences that they're going to have and what they're going to say. And Jessie, how proud they are of you and your husband for putting this. This is huge. You're showing them about following your dreams and your passions, and there's an end result. And that's a huge lesson for a child. And yay, you. Like, that's amazing. Amazing.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, it's incredible. And for all those who are listening to, we will have links to Jessie's new book, which you can pre-order on Amazon. And where else can you pre-order your book, Jessie?
Yeah, so you can pre-order on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble, also on Schiffer Publishing. Any large platform will have it right now, and I hope you do. And we will be having some events come this fall and special promotions. So if you do pre-order the book, make sure you take a photo of it and send it to me via Instagram, because I have something very special in the works for those fans.
You always do. You
Ooh.
always do. Well, Jessie, you have been an incredible delight. You've danced from ballet to motherhood to a blog to this wonderful book that's coming out. I mean, talk about reblooming along the way and taking all the blooms with you. What advice would you have for people who are a little afraid? I mean, maybe they've done some things in their past and they just, I mean, I love the why not, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That is a definite. But what would you say to folks who are just trying to figure out how to take that next step?
You know, it sounds very cliche, but just take the leap. What's the worst that's going to happen? You know, measure your, what's at risk. If it's, choosing between quitting your job and becoming a skydiving instructor, maybe don't take that leap yet. Make sure you have a plan B. That's the advice I've always had, is have a plan B, a backup. But give yourself the grace and the chance to believe in a passion. And whether it's a passion that leads to a beautiful hobby or a new and stunning career, it's understanding that your interests, your creativity, and your focus on that topic is worthwhile, not only to you to explore, but for the other people in this world who are kind of waiting to do the same thing, and you can inspire them to do it. And I have never looked back, because this was so fulfilling to my soul. And I think for others, it can be too. Just take the risk and see what happens. Why not?
Why not?
So
I love
inspiring.
that. Oh my gosh.
You're an inspiration, my friend.
You are a huge inspiration. I mean, we just love you, and it has been such a joy to not only get to know you the past couple of years, but certainly now to share your beautiful story with all of our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you. And thank you for your beautiful friendship. I count myself so lucky in this world.
Well, we count ourselves lucky to know you, and we certainly count ourselves lucky to have also said why not, because it brought us all together. So thank you for speaking with us today. You're the best. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Lori, that was incredible. What did you take away from this?
Well, what I'm always fascinated by are common threads. And I love when someone, Jessie had a passion for dance that was deep, but she also knew herself. And as she was growing, she knew that she needed to maybe make a change, but she brought forward all the strength and her love of the theater and the love of food that she gathered from her family. And she just kind of has woven it in to what she's doing now. And so I'm always a little bit of a geek about common threads and how people take things that they love and they gather them together, and then that's what they take forward in their lives.
No, I felt the exact same way. Her comment about creating a table filled with love and trying to bring that forward, but also her passions for the arts and creating not only just food on the table, but a beautiful space for people to gather. And to me, that is almost like a performance. You're pulling together the elements, and then at the end, I was in some productions, not as fancy as she was for sure, but I remember prior to dress rehearsal, you think, oh my God, how is this going to come together? And when you're cooking, sometimes you feel that way too. There's little elements here or parts here, and you think, how is this going to come together at the end? But then it does. And then you're able to do a beautiful presentation, but more importantly, bring your audience together, which are your family and friends. And I love that she's encouraging us to do that, because I think particularly since the pandemic, we all need to come together, and we need those opportunities to gather and create memories and remember not only the past, but remember and help others to remember moving forward.
Yeah, and I certainly need her book because I am not a great cook. And my family has stories of, like, for my daughter's birthday, I attempted a carrot cake and we now dubbed it salad cake because it was so crunchy. So our family stories around food are usually comical and me making mistakes. So I'm definitely going to need Jessie's book.
Well, I think we all need Jessie's book, and certainly I hope you'll all follow Jessie and Straight to the Hips Baby on Instagram. She is fantastic and wonderful and kind, and definitely pick up her new book. And we thank you all. So peace, love, and ReBloom, everyone. Life is too short not to follow your passions. So go out there and let your heart plant you where you are meant to be and grow your joy.
We will be right here sharing more incredible stories of reinvention with you. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode of ReBloom.
Until next time, I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
Peace, love, and ReBloom, dear friends.